I think NASCAR looks at some of these things and says, okay, if we give them this right now, then a month down the road they're going to be doing this, and then we're going to be that, and then pretty soon it's going to be way out of hand.
I kind of thought this was a aha moment for them, just because this is not a track where he's traditionally run well at.
If somebody were to ever say, well, I could do that, I'd take them to a go-kart track, which is basically like T-ball for us, right?
Right.
And show them just how far, how different we are from many others.
You never know when you're just going to have an off weekend.
I've kind of gotten the ability to have the platform that I want, and it is my platform, and I can speak to whatever I feel like talking about.
We're in the mix, and it makes it a lot more fun when you're in the mix than you are just struggling and trying to figure out what direction to go.
Yeah, it's tough, and sorry for being bouncy, the roads here.
It's like if you have, the all-you-can-eat buffet every single day of the week, people are going to get tired of it, right? So if it's a special thing, I think people get more excited for it.
Hi, Bo.
Raise your hand up so she can see it. There you go.
Truthfully, even as a company, I think it was, very head-scratching why at the beginning all four of us just went instantly straight to the back. We just really struggled.
Welcome on to the Backstretch. It is Talladega race week. But before we take on the formidable 2.5 mile racetrack or 2.67 mile racetrack in Alabama, we got to talk about Texas first. It was quite a week, another big week for Hendrick Motorsports. Chase Elliott finally got off the snide, picking up his first victory in 40 plus races. Is he back? I don't know. Is Chase Elliott back? He's been running pretty well this year. He finally got a win at a track he's not particularly good at, but that's one of the things I'm going to talk about with our crew chief, Chris Carrier, coming up a little bit later on. I also wanted him to explain to me the whole idea of penalties for uniform violations for crew members. One of the cool things about having a, 40 plus year crew member / crew chief on this podcast is that he knows all the inner ins and outs of pit road. So he's going to be able to explain to us why those ratings are so important and why these crew members are now getting picked on or getting fined for not being up to uniform code, because it's probably something that a lot of us don't really understand. So look forward to having those conversations with Chris coming up. Also, our guest this week is Ryan Preece. The thing that's so interesting to me about Ryan Preece every time I interview him is that I always get a little bit deeper glimpse into his life, right? The first or second time I interviewed him a few weeks ago, his baby kitten jumped up onto his shoulder and crashed our interview when he was at home. This time we're inside of a race shop doing an interview with him. And if you don't know much about Ryan, when you ask him what his hobbies are, it's cars. I mean, he lives, breathes cars, working on race cars of all different types, modifieds, his cup car. That's what he does. There's nothing else other than his family and his race cars. So really interesting talking to Ryan, because he just gives a really unique perspective, kind of a old school racer perspective of how he approaches each race weekend. So that's what's coming up this week on the show. Let's get rolling. With crew chief Chris Carrier, who is also the crew chief of the number 75 Food Country truck in the Craftsman Truck Series. Almost said Camping World.
Almost. That's okay. That's
have
okay.
Those senior moments every once in a while. All right, so Chris, we are coming off of a huge weekend at Texas. Hendrick Motorsports still.
Well, they're they're in pretty good shape for this year. We're not counting any of those guys out or all the way in. William Byron is still my pick for the favorite or the strongest guy at the moment. I said at the moment because I think he's done the most up to this point overall, and I think they got the momentum. Now they got Chase Elliott back in the mix. A lot of fans have been waiting, looking, watching, wondering what's going on. What can be wrong? Did he get hurt worse than we're knowing? Da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-da. They got their stuff together this past weekend and came away with a trophy. And now they're in the mix. He punched his ticket to pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoffs at this point at the end of the year. And now they can go on, along with William Byron, along with Kyle Larson, and start working on, okay, what are we going to do in the playoffs? And they've got that monkey kind of off their back, and they can say, okay, we're back in the game. You all quit your murmuring and your gossip and your rumors. We're there.
So do you think they're back? I mean, I kind of thought this was a aha moment for them, just because this is not a track where he's traditionally run well at.
That's true.
So is he back? I mean,
well, I think if you ask him and his team, they're probably truthfully going to say, we're not at our best. We're not. But now they've got to win, so they can get that monkey, get that claw that's been on them. They're relieved of that, because now they're in the playoffs and they have a goal. Now they can start working toward, okay, how good can we be by the time we get to the playoffs? What can we do to position ourselves? Now, there's probably going to be some times for all of them that they're trying this and trying that, whittling through all the things that might be big hitters, big positive hitters, and most of them probably aren't going to be. But they may come across this, they may come across that, that's going to say, hey, this will work. When we get into the playoffs, this is going to give us an advantage, and we'll have better race cars, we'll race better. That's the game they play now. And now, Hendrick is sitting in pretty good shape as far as that goes. He might have all 4 cars in the playoffs, which that's going to be pretty overwhelming to the other teams.
Weekly check-in on Ford. We still haven't had a Ford win. It looks like Blaney is running pretty well, and I actually want to give a shout out to Todd Gilliland, because I think he's running kind of a punching above his weight class. But the rest of the Ford camp feels like, and I get Chris Keselowski almost won this week, so I will shout that out too. I feel like it's still shaky though. I
still think that there's some things missing from the packages, whatever that Ford has. I don't know if it's aero, I don't know if it's engine, I don't know if it's just particularly chassis setup or understanding about this or understanding about that. The ones you mentioned are definitely the bright spots for the Ford camp. Todd Gilliland's one of those guys, a very talented driver, and me personally, I felt like he went in the Cup Series a little too early to expect success. Right. The first couple years, it's just like, okay, look, man, he's not got that many races, and now it seems like the trend to push younger drivers into the Cup Series and just give up the first year or so and say, it's all about learning these cars. It's all about learning how to run 500-mile races. And now he's got that experience under his belt. You know very well he's hungry, and he's a talented driver. So I think that it may not be too long before you look out and say, hey, this guy's the top 4 driver. He's one of the ones that's running up front every week. We know what Ryan Blaney can do. We know what Penske Racing's capable of, and also Brad Keselowski. So it's not that they don't have personnel and drivers and driver ability and experience and knowledge. They just, right now, they're lacking, and they're behind the Chevrolet teams, they're behind the Toyota teams for whatever reason. Just remember, they were last year also, and they ended up with a championship trophy. So I wouldn't like, I don't think we need to start a GoFundMe for them just yet.
Well, and Blaney says his team is further along than they were last year, which could be frightening for everybody come playoffs.
Well, I would agree with that. If you look back to last year and think about, okay, how were they really running? How were they competing? Where did they fall in during the race and their finishes? I think he's probably definitely ahead of where he was last year. I don't think anybody's panicking. Penske Racing's been racing a long time. Man, they've been through a lot of ups and downs, and they got a lot of very smart, experienced, very talented people in that place, and they've got great drivers. They're not going to panic just yet. I mean, we're still in the month of April, so there's a lot of races to come up, and there's a lot of information to gain. So again, let's stay calm. But there, it is. I'm sure Ford fans aren't happy.
Right, for sure. So NASCAR penalized several crew members this week for violating the uniform code. I don't want to get too much into the weeds into this penalty or that penalty, but kind of explain to those of us who have never put on one of those uniforms or the safety stuff what the ratings mean and why it's so important to kind of adhere to those.
Well, they're thinking about most of the penalties I think that came this week were over the failure to adhere to the rules as far as like the fireproof underwear and the uniforms and stuff that are they mandate, you know, SFI rated uniforms, underwear, whatever, because they know there's a testing procedure that goes through that will help keep these guys from getting burned, okay? And also the helmets, all the stuff that's there to try to keep them safe if something happens on pit road, which eventually things are going to happen on pit road. You got 40 guys coming down and they all want to be out first and everything like that. It's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous position to be in, dangerous set of circumstances, and they want to keep these guys safe. Now, some of the things I will tell you are a little bit difficult. You know, it's like there's red tape here to go through, and guys will, you know, trim their underwear, the fireproof underwear they wear, and this, that, and other for comfort reasons, for arm flexibility, and this, that, and other. That's kind of a no-no. I think one of the penalties was over that. So is this going a little too far? I don't know. I think NASCAR looks at some of these things and says, okay, if we give them this right now, then a month down the road they're going to be doing this, and then we're going to be that, and then pretty soon it's going to be way out of hand. Apparently they felt like, look, this is the week that we're going to clamp down on some of this stuff, and we're going to have to come with some iron fist to it and try to corral it and get it back where we want it to be. Man, I don't know. I remember the Andy Griffith episode when they're talking about the speed limit on such and such a hill in Mayberry, and the speech was, well, if we give them 35, well, then they'll take 40, and then they'll take. It's kind of the same thing.
It's like driving down Volunteer Parkway.
Driving down Volunteer Parkway, they give you 38, and they're going to, you know. But again, it's things that I think NASCAR comes to the point, it's like we got to corral this back in before it gets out of our control and somebody gets hurt, and then the questions are, well, why didn't they have the proper safety, follow the proper safety procedures, or have the right clothing, or whatever. So I don't know. I guess this will continue and people will get back in the, you know, get back on the straight line there and do what they're supposed to do, and it'll make everybody happy, hopefully.
All right, speaking of straight lines, how about 4x4x4, about 15 rows deep at Talladega this weekend? I asked Ryan Preece, who's our guest this week, about this, but I'm going to ask you this same question. When you go to Talladega, do you have a plan? Can you have a plan? What do you do if the plan blows up?
I have come to the position personally as a crew chief. It's like, and I've heard drivers say it, it's like, you can make all the plans you want. We're going to pit on this. We're all going to pit together. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to all help one another. Very rarely does that stuff work. Now, there are instances, and I'll say in the Cup Series, the team alliances, I think, are much stronger than any other Truck Series or the Xfinity Series, and they can make a difference in the race when they stick to those plans. Okay, all the Hendrick cars, you can't say all the Chevrolets, because that's not going to happen, or all the Toyotas or Fords, but the Penske cars, the Gibbs cars, the Hendrick cars, there's enough of them and they're strong enough to where, okay, we're going to run this part of the race, we're going to run in a line, we're going to help one another. When it comes down to like 5 to go, it's
the Wild Wild West.
No, it's like, man, I'm out here racing for myself. And to be honest with you, Heather, that's the way it should be.
Right.
Racing is like golf. It's one guy against everybody else in the field, and I think that's the way racing was founded. That's what it's founded upon. Now, if they're in the middle of the race and they know they're going to have to come under green to take fuel or run out of fuel, then a lot of those guys will say, okay, we're going to stay on this strategy and we're going to come down pit road together, so we'll have drafting partners when we go out. That is the advantage of it, and they communicate that, okay, if the caution falls here and if we run green flag to this lap, we're going to have to stop here because we pretty much know how far we can go on fuel and tires, maybe. Probably not. Tires is not really a big deal there, but the fuel mileage part, we all come down on this, and all the drivers and all the crew chief can have confidence, okay, I'm not going to get stuck out here by myself. I'm not going to be the only one on pit road, and when I drive out a pit road, my driver's not going to have any drafting partners, and then I'm screwed. So that part of it is good. The rest of it, it's too chaotic. It's too fast. Things happen too fast. You just said it. They're going to be 3 and 4 wide a big part of the day, several rows deep. And if you're sitting around saying, okay, I need to get behind that guy, before you know it, you're going to be getting behind every guy because they all go by and you may be in a crash.
Right.
So I don't know. The game plan stuff is a little bit overblown. To me, I wish nobody could have a game plan and let every 40 guys race it out amongst themselves. But what it is nowadays, and there'll be some planning, there'll be some strategy, and it'll all be, Chevrolets, or at least some Chevrolets, and then some Toyotas and some Fords. They'll pit on different laps during these things because they have strategies of like, okay, if we pit early and go together, or pit later and come together, this will work out to where we'll be ahead of the rest of the groups.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. It'll be exciting. Last few races, it's been like photo finishes, 3 wide, beating and banging, come to the line. That's what all those crazy people are going to be there for on Talladega Boulevard and in the infield and in the stands. This week, I think all in NASCAR world will be great.
Ryan, first of all, thank you for joining us today. Obviously, I guess the big talking point to start the season has kind of been the performance of Ford, but I feel like even though Ford hasn't won a race this year, you guys at Stewart-Haas have had a better season than you've had last year. How do you guys feel about the way you've performed so far this year?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to perform has definitely been better for us. We seem to have a little bit more consistency and a little bit more speed. For now, for us, it's really trying to narrow in on that balance of what we've been looking for to try and contend for wins. It seems like, we've been kind of floating around that 13th to 8th range, which is a big step up from last year. But, us as race car drivers, we want more. We want to win races.
So your second season at Stewart-Haas, personally, what do you think your development's been like in this seat now that you've had some time?
Yeah, so for us, it's just communication. It's trying to narrow in on the stuff that makes me feel comfortable in the race car and what doesn't, and how to when we show up for these races on the weekends, you can't change much. What you decide to leave the race shop with is what you have. So I feel like we've been doing a better job of unloading closer and making it better throughout the weekend. So certainly going into Talladega, we have super fast, super speedway cars, and that makes us that much more excited.
So you mentioned Talladega. You're not a guy that I necessarily think about when we go to these super speedways, but I looked at your results at Talladega and they're pretty good. So how do you feel going into Talladega?
Yeah, I think my best finishes come there, and obviously last year we had a top 10. So it's one of those things, like, you do your best to prepare, but you really don't know what to expect, because how can you know what to expect when everything's completely unexpected? So it's just for us, it's trying to keep track position. It's extremely difficult to make up for that now. Sorry, I'm in a race shop, so if you hear some grinding and everything, but it's certainly I feel really good about it because our speed's there. We just need to do our best to try and save fuel and put us in position at the end.
All right, I want to get back to Talladega, but you mentioned you're in a race shop. I love when I read your bio that everything that says about you is just racing. Your hobbies are racing. When you're racing, you're racing. When you're working, you're racing. You're now racing. What is it? Why is everything? Why are you so connected to this sport?
Well, I know like some people like to talk about things they do outside of racing, but this is all I've ever done. So whenever somebody asks me like, "Hey, what's your hobby?" I look at them and say race cars or cars because growing up in a racing family, my dad was a gearhead. He loved cars and race cars, and I grew up the same way. So I enjoy the process of figuring out how to make speed, how to make cars faster. I enjoy driving them, obviously. I know how to make a car go fast, but sometimes you can't drive a slow car fast. And understanding how to make that car better or communicate to your crew chief what's going on and dissect the areas of the car that we need to work on, that's the other side I have passion for. So I don't know if I would be able to develop those skills if I was out somewhere playing baseball or something whatnot. That's just not my sport, right? So, yeah, no, that's why I spend a lot of my time here at the race shop, and yeah, it's just a different sport from a lot of other ones.
Do you watch any other sports, or are you just strictly like a guy that has racing on when you're not racing?
I enjoy like hockey or football or even I've actually learned to enjoy golf a little bit, like watching golf. I suck at it, but it's something that you learn to appreciate because you understand to perform at a high level like some of these athletes do. Even baseball and soccer, like I can't kick a soccer ball. I can't hit a baseball. I certainly don't want to get smoked and tackled by somebody in the NFL, or even hit a golf ball like they do. So I think when you compete at a high level like we do racing cars, you develop an appreciation for every sport and every player that does that.
I feel like golf is a lot like racing because it's like something everybody looks at it and thinks they can do it, and only the best can really do it.
Yeah, and that's what separates you from many others. If somebody were to ever say, "Well, I could do that," I'd take them to a go-kart track, which is basically like T-ball for us, right?
Right.
And show them just how far, how different we are from many others. So certainly, I do appreciate the other sports, but racing is what I live and breathe for.
So Talladega this week, getting back to that, do you have any kind of plan at all at Talladega, or is it just react and, go with the flow of the race?
So it's always good to go in with a plan, right? You don't ever want to go into a race unprepared because if that situation that you could have prepared for arose, then you're not prepared for it. But at the same time, Talladega is one of those races that you have to adapt, exactly what you said, react and adapt. And it's extremely important. So yeah, I think the most crucial thing for us is trying to be in the first 2 or 3 rows in the final 2 or 3 laps. And whether I want to be leading or not leading is kind of the question mark right now, but certainly I'd rather be more prepared than unprepared.
Gotcha. Final question for you. You come from a short track background, right? More so with the modifieds and stuff. Is that your favorite kind of track? Like what kind of tracks do you like to race?
Yeah, so I enjoy short tracks just because I feel like there's so many tools for us race car drivers to go out there and manipulate our race cars and make them go faster. When we're at 1.5 miles, in my opinion, it's a little bit more difficult to make speed. But that could also just be my driving style. But yeah, coming from modified short tracks up in New England, just that whole background and really I've won a lot of races doing it has been that's just what I've gravitated to and enjoy doing.
For my final thought this week, we're going to talk about super speedway racing. It's kind of, to me, almost like the WWE of NASCAR. It's a lot of show. It's crazy. It's not really what racing is, kind of like WWE isn't really what really hardcore wrestling is, but fans love it. Fans love drivers on the edge of their seats, on that close to each other on the racetrack. It's crazy. But the question has to be asked a little bit, are we doing this too much? Now that we've reconfigured Atlanta, we do 2 races at Daytona, 2 races at Atlanta, 2 races at Talladega. And it's not really what we think of a traditional racing. It's entertaining, it's fun, but from a fan perspective, why do we like seeing wrecked race cars? Like, why is that a thing? I know the teams don't really like it. Drivers have learned to accept it. Some like it. Some like it because it's their only chance to really win, because it is such a wild card. But are we doing it too much? I'm kind of on the fence here on this one. I think that I love the new Atlanta. I think it's really interesting. I think that maybe we could do that only once a year and it would be fine. I don't know that you can take away races from Daytona and Talladega because they are such staples in the NASCAR garage. Like, they're just a part of the schedule. They're ingrained as much as Darlington or Martinsville or Bristol, right? You can't take any of those races off the schedule. They're just too much of what the sport is. But I wouldn't want to see any more of that. I know last week after Texas, people were talking about repays and what are they going to do with Texas. I don't want to see another Atlanta for sure. Like, we're at our max, just like we had kind of gotten with road courses. It's always an interesting week. It's not my favorite weekend, in case you can't tell, because I don't like race cars. And I have seen too many races where, thankfully, I only have ever watched one race where a race car driver has died, and that was Dale Earnhardt. But I've certainly had moments where I have wondered if that was going to happen, when I saw Carl Edwards flying through the stands at Talladega, or Austin Dillon going into the fence at Daytona, or Ryan Newman's really bad crash a few years ago at Daytona. It takes your breath away. And dealing with these guys, interviewing these guys, talking to these guys, they're just a little bit more than characters on a TV screen for me. So I don't really like that. So this is not my favorite type of racing. I know why people enjoy it, but it's just not for me. But I think it might be time to start saying enough at the super speedways. We're good. 6 is great. 5 would probably be better in my opinion. But hey, it's Talladega. It's a wild card, and fans seem to love it. So enjoy the weekend. Time for Talladega. Be safe on Talladega Boulevard, though. It is crazy out there. And we'll see you next week on the Backstretch.